welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. That's the Hall of Famer Chris Carter. That is Nick Wright. It is hump day, people. Let's get it together. It's Wednesday.
Good morning. Good to see you, Jenna Wolf. Let's do it.
Let's do some show. We got a lot to talk about. I just was a solid point. I pointed with authority there. That's how my dad taught me to do it. Carson Wentz might be out longer than we thought. Kyle Kuzma thinks LeBron and the Lakers are underrated. And the Patriots, they just want to win. And that's where we start today with Tom Brady and those Patriots. Brady will make his preseason debut Thursday against the Eagles. Last time he played a game of football, it was against the Eagles. It was the Super Bowl. Spoiler alert, the Eagles won. Lots of questions after that loss for the Patriots about whether Brady would return for his 19th season. One of the reasons why, well, he's 41. Another reason, well, his relationship with Bill Belichick. But Brady says, don't worry about that.
I think our priorities are, the same as they've always been, and I think that's why we get along so well. Is we're here to win, and like I said, it's been a very professional environment that he's created. I think I'm very lucky to be in that environment. I think he's the best coach that's ever coached in the NFL, and I feel very privileged to have kind of been mentored by him for as long as I have.
Well, that's nice to hear, considering all the little rumblings we've heard this offseason about their relationship. See, what would prevent the Patriots from getting back to the Super Bowl at this point?
Well, I think first things first, we should talk about the relationship that they do have, because there's only a few people who really know about their relationship, and I would say all the rest of it is just a bunch of just media hype, trying to get some insight and just trying to say things from a sensationalism standpoint because maybe they don't understand the relationship. Tom Brady said a couple very, very critical things. And I haven't really heard him say this about many people. He says this about Tom House. Well, first of all, I'll tell about his dad, how his dad was his role model and everything, and how important he is in his life. He talks about Tom House, how he really changed his throwing motion to be the Tom Brady who he is now and how much respect for him. He talks about his trainer, how much he's changed his thinking and eating and how it's changed his whole career. And he talked about Bill Belichick and him mentoring him. He didn't say coaching. He said he's one of the greatest coaches ever, but he said him mentoring him. Now, Bill Belichick doesn't do that, but for a few people. And Tom Brady is one of the fortunate ones. Like Bill Belichick, he showed up to Randy Moss's Hall of Fame ceremony, surprised Randy. Randy was overcome and even cried, afterwards, because he was really shocked that they came.
And Belichick mentioned when he talked about that when he was back at the facility that there's only so much time, that you can only have so many relationships with a select few guys. Speaking to that point, to where it goes beyond coach-player, he said Randy was one of those guys he had that special relationship with. Tom, obviously, another one of them.
And Bill has given Tom the ultimate authority from a player as far as running meetings, saying things to coaches, changing plays. Like what he's been able to do, they've been able to do together. It's been a phenomenal relationship. I've said this all along when people would come. We'd have a report, and I'd say, listen, this relationship is a great relationship between two tremendous competitive people. And it's worked for them. We try to tear it down, but I think that's the most important thing. As long as they're on the same page, and it is about winning. Tom knows I'm not going to select the players. I'm not going to be able to determine how much money they're going to make. And Bill's going to do things a certain way. This is his team, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And that's how they're going to win. If anybody ever comes between that relationship, I believe that will affect them even in a bigger way than anything we've ever seen out of New England, compared to a player being let go, a player being traded, a player being benched. That relationship right there, every time, if they stay together, they got a chance to win every game.
And it's only because of those two that the Patriots, as presently constituted, are in the Super Bowl conversation, the Super Bowl favorites. To circle back to Jenna's question, there was a period of time when they won their first 3 Super Bowls. Obviously, Belichick was a huge part of that, and by Super Bowl III, Brady was one of the leading contributors to that. But you had All-Pro, a couple Hall of Fame defensive players. You had a really quality roster. When we get here in 2018, and we just look at 2018 Patriots versus 2017 Patriots. All right, so their offensive line is worse, right? They lost Nate Solder. You look at the players, offensive line is worse. The wide receiver room is worse. You lost Brandon Cooks. You lost Danny Amendola. Now you will be adding Julian Edelman, who you didn't have last year, but not for the first 4 games of the season. I would argue the defense, which was shaky at best last year, didn't get better by losing Malcolm Butler. And let's not forget that at this moment last year, the single best quarterback room was in New England. We learned by midway point through the season, the Patriots didn't have 1 starting quarterback on the roster. They didn't have 2. They started the year with 3. Jacoby Brissett might not be a super high-quality starting quarterback, but he showed he could start games in Indy. Jimmy Garoppolo's got $120 million to be a starter in San Francisco.
Both guys were traded for. Now, people thought Garoppolo was worth a lot more. I mean, I don't know why Belichick gave the deal to San Francisco, but it lets you know the depth for which no other team could have had all 3 other quarterbacks traded for less than a third rounder.
The Patriots started the year with 3 quarterbacks who, by the end of the year, all 3 of them started multiple games for 3 different teams in the league. So how can are the Patriots, what will prevent them bringing it back to the Super Bowl? Not enough talent. Like, period, point blank. Like, roster-wise, remove the head coach and Brady, this team is worse. Where did they get better from 17 to 18? Running backs, maybe. They spent the pick on Stoney Michel. They add Jeremy Hill. They lose Deion Lewis. But aside from that, where are the Patriots better than they were last year?
But it's almost, to your point, what you're saying is as long as there's a relationship between these 2 guys, it almost doesn't matter who else the Patriots have and what their personnel is and who they've gained or lost in the offseason, because these 2 guys are the foundation with which this team kicks off the season and moves forward.
They really are. They have to be together, but this is a league about talent. As long as those 2 are on the same page, they will have an opportunity. But this year, I believe it's as hard as they are not the overwhelming. Let's go back 365 days. New England Patriots
we'd ever seen.
We had never seen someone
It was like 36 to some crazy number or something.
No, Nick will look up Vegas. We'll call Vegas, see what they're saying, and Vegas is not saying the same thing because this roster.
They are still the favorites to make the Super Bowl, and a lot of that has to do with the AFC versus NFC. See, you've talked a lot about that. One of the things players on the Patriots, remove Tom Brady, that rubs them the wrong way about what shows like this do is we act too often like Tom Brady and Belichick and 52 guys off the street could do what they do.
That's what they hate.
That we don't give the other players.
They don't care if you call them the evil empire. They don't call them cheaters and everything. They don't even care about that kind of stuff. But this rubs them the wrong way.
And so what I'm saying here is actually going against that. I am trying to give credit to how important the other guys on the roster are. And while they were awesome last year, they lost their first game of the year to the Kansas City Chiefs. They nearly lost that game to the Steelers, and we saw them have to fight and claw to beat the Jags in the AFC Championship game, and then they lost the Super Bowl. And I don't look at this team and say, you got better by losing Nate Solder. You got better by trading Brandon Cooks away. You got better by losing Malcolm Butler and Danny Amendola. This is not me coming on TV saying the Pats, they're finished, the run is over. But it is saying they are not in the giant pole position they were last year. When going into the season, as you mentioned, they were the biggest preseason favorite. The discussion last year was, can they go undefeated? Right? Remember that? It was, can they go undefeated? Because they had spent, you looked at them last year, you said, oh, they added Brandon Cooks. They added this talent. They went all in on the season.
Yeah, I believe they're going to miss Malcolm Butler. And I know in 4 seasons, Malcolm Butler with Bill Belichick, he won them 1 Super Bowl. This is what I can guarantee you. Whoever plays that position, they are not going to win them 1 Super Bowl single-handedly the way Butler did. And I believe the thing people aren't talking about is Matt Patricia. 14 years of service to Bill Belichick. You got a lot of football intel. He's a good teacher of the game of football. And I believe when you try to replace him, you do lose something. Now, they brought Josh McDaniel back, so they get the whammy on both sides, offense and defensive coordinator. But Matt Patricia's ability to teach Bill Belichick's brand of football, I believe, will affect a defense that doesn't have a lot of talent. And last season, the reason why they lost the Super Bowl was because of that bad defense.
All right, let's take a break there. Coming up, still more football. The team the Patriots face, the Eagles. Carson Wentz breaking some news about his status for Week 1. Are the Super Bowl champs in trouble already? That's next. This is First Things First. Moving on, the Eagles travel to New England to face the Patriots Thursday night, and they will do so without Carson Wentz. Preseason wasn't his plan. Regular season was his plan. Week 1 was the target date for his return after recovering from that torn ACL and LCL. But the Birds have held him back recently. He hasn't participated in 11-on-11 drills in weeks, and he has yet to be cleared for contact. Now Wentz is saying that it's going to be close for Week 1. All right, Chris, how careful should Philly be with Carson Wentz here? He is their future. Does it pay to really rush him back to make sure he's all set for Week 1?
No, I don't think they're going to rush him back, but I think that it is on the board, especially when you have someone like Nick Foles. It's easy to err on the side of, we'll take some time to start him. I think he'll be there week number 1, but you have to look at their schedule. It's always a big night when you're the defending champ playing on that Thursday night, kicking off the season. But then their schedule after that is they go to Tampa Bay, Indy, and at Tennessee. Yep. I don't believe that to be the most important part of their schedule. Now, they got a brutal schedule. But when they get into the month of October, they need their best players out there on the field.
Tell America what they have right after those opening 4 you just said.
Let's just do a little tough. Minnesota, New York Football Giants, Carolina, Jacksonville. Yeah. So that's a gauntlet that might be tougher than a Super Bowl run if they don't get home field advantage.
Right.
That's the kind of teams they're going to have to beat. So I believe he will be there at the beginning with the type of knee injury he's had. Typically, we have seen quarterbacks or other players, they were ready week number 1. Now, I could understand, too, maybe caution a little bit so people like Dusty and other Eagles fans and everything, they're like, oh, man, he might not be. But I think he will be there. But they still do have the guy that was the MVP of the Super Bowl, so they have a luxury. And when you look at Philadelphia's staff, the roster, that's one of the things that you have to bake into that. Man, they lost key players last year. They are deeper this year, and they have the playoff and the Super Bowl experience, and as Nick would say, the best backup situation in pro football. So if you have that, you have a great roster, why wouldn't you just allow the natural healing process to take place? I believe he'll be there week number 1, but because their roster is so strong.
And because also, and when we're talking about will he not be there week 1, every day matters. The Eagles start the season before anybody else other than Atlanta. They started 3 days early. After week 1, they then have, of course, that little mini bye week from the Thursday night game. September 6th is when they start. They don't play again until September 16th. And you mentioned you can kind of ease him in to the season if such a thing exists. I know there's no West Alabamas you get to play, but there's a difference between, as you illustrated, their September schedule and their October schedule. I think everyone, though, should be cautious with expecting Carson Wentz to pick up exactly where he left off. We saw just a year ago 2 young quarterbacks, one playing at an MVP level, one playing the best football of his career, by the way, as a 2nd overall pick in year 2, and that was Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. Those guys both got injured late in the 2016 season, and then their 2017 results were nowhere near what their 2016 results were. Derek Carr was on pace to potentially win the MVP. Last year was a down year. Marcus Mariota was an ascending. This is exactly what we thought he would be, a 96 quarterback rating in year 2. Last year, he was nothing close to that. Now, even if you don't think Carson Wentz is going to have that type of regression, even if you think Carson Wentz is a higher caliber talent than either of those guys.
Most people do.
Right, which I think most people do, and I think he illustrated it last year. Last year, Wentz played better than either of those guys have ever played in their careers. So even if you just bake in a little bit of regression, which I think is fair, most guys don't do what Aaron Rodgers did, which is at age 30, get injured, and then at age 31 have arguably the greatest season of his career. Like most guys, Brady, the year after the injury was a down year in comparison, and then he got back to being Tom Brady.
Would you call it regression, though? Could you account for, I don't know, some sort of adjustment period, a little bit of rust coming off the injury you had to just get thrown back in? Would it take a couple games for him to get his timing, the rhythm back, the relationship with the receivers? Does that factor in at all?
Carson Wentz is a superstar. All right, he's going to be a superstar, and I believe he'll be a superstar in week number 1. I mean, he is a horse. He is a great athlete, and he has the type of offensive weapons around him and the protection, so the confidence in the offensive line. If he had a spotty offensive line, if he didn't have 3 running backs the way he does have, if he didn't have 3 veteran receivers, which he does have, yeah, I might be concerned, which Derek Carr didn't have those things. Marcus Mariota didn't have those things. And all of them went through adjustments as far as coaching changes, coordinators, and everything. So all the things Carson Wentz, he doesn't have. He has a stable franchise. All right? He's got a guy behind him in the backup who don't want to be the starter and realizes he's a stud. He's got a young, up-and-coming coach. He's got the support of the organization. And you know what else that Tennessee and Oakland didn't have? He didn't have a great defense. So he can sit back, he can hand the ball off, he can come back gradually. They can expand this offense as time seems fit, but I believe that's going to be week number 1. Carson Wentz is going to be a superstar and continue to be a superstar in this league for a long time.
So you're of the belief he's going to have more the trajectory of a guy like Drew Brees, who the year after his major injury had the best year of his career up to that point.
We don't have any evidence that we could present to people to say that Carson Wentz, the reason why he's going to go backwards. All right? He doesn't have the supporting cast. He doesn't have the organizational support. Like, he's going to rush himself back. No. Doesn't have a defense who's going to get turnovers and short fields to play on. No, we don't see those types of things. So why would we expect him to go backwards? I haven't seen anything or any really concrete thing to make me think that, oh, he's going to go back. No, I don't see that.
Listen, and I'm not assigning it to him. I do think that when you haven't seen a guy play since injury, I think all you can do is take historical examples of it. And there are
Odell Beckham.
Okay.
Watch how he's going to go backwards.
Well, sure. So that's an example of a guy.
Yeah, he's not going nowhere. He's going to be a superstar in this league for a long time, too. These injuries,
so yeah, that's
most athletes come back from, let alone our best athletes. All right, Carson Wentz is not just a quarterback. He is a great athlete. Odell Beckham is not just one of the best receivers in the NFL. He is a ridiculous athlete, and those type of athletes bounce back from these very, very common injuries that both of these guys have.
I was just going to ask, the ACL, the LCL, that is an injury you can recover fully from, come back to your old self.
In 2018, yeah. I mean, we've come a long way in the last 20-some years on how people recover from it. I think people saw I don't want to say it wasn't a gruesome injury, but just the impact of the injury. It wasn't like people have, because we saw Carson Wentz get hurt and we saw the impact.
Tom Brady had a more significant injury. A guy hit him frontal while he was in the pocket with his knee planted. And that's the same position he is in for almost every throw. Tom Brady is not the athlete of Carson Wentz. And if Tom Brady could get back, now, it was later in his career. Aaron Rodgers was injured later in their career. All right, but Carson Wentz is as good an athlete as Aaron Rodgers, if not better, and we know there's no question as far as athleticism versus Brady.
All right, let's take a break there. Coming up, let's talk some basketball. Are too many people hating on LeBron and the Lakers already? It's too soon. That's next. This is First Things First. Friday on Fox, the Big Three playoffs are live from Dallas. It all begins at 8 Eastern on Fox, or stream it live on the Fox Sports app. All right, time for stories to start your morning, brought to you by the unexpected energy of ExxonMobil.
Before we do that, the Big Three playoffs this weekend, I apologize, I wanted to talk about this if you all have been watching it. Power and the three-headed monsters, who are the 1 and the 2 seed in this tournament, have been dominating the league. They're both 7-1. Chris Birdman Anderson's renaissance will only be complete with the Big Three championship. Nate Robinson, remember how he started the season, C?
Yes.
Fighting folks. He's got his team into the playoffs.
Beater.
Buzzer beater, fighting folks. By the way, without that buzzer beater, they're not in the playoffs. They scraped in by the skin of their teeth at 5-3. Very excited for
Credit to Ice Cube. It's a good product.
It is, and you can see it gradually getting better. You saw he talked about maybe getting the Mamba involved next year. He told us that would be his #1 pick of anybody you could get, but the playoffs this weekend should be awesome.
Yeah, me and some of the staff members in a couple of weeks, we're going to go do chicken and waffles in Brooklyn and go to the championship.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
You guys aren't invited.
We know that as
the chicken and waffle place. I was invited the last time and I didn't go, and now I'm blacklisted.
Not invited and didn't go, so I will go with you.
No, because you're not. They fry chicken in there. They don't want people in the corner doing burpees and stuff.
Jenna, do you guys have tofu and waffle product?
Grilled
is that an option?
Oh, boy. All right, now it's time for some stories to start your morning, brought to you by the unexpected energy of ExxonMobil. Ben Roethlisberger is in the concussion protocol after being hit in practice. He laid on the ground for a few minutes before leaving under his own power. Chris, how big of a deal will Big Ben's lack of preseason reps be should he miss some time?
It's not the preseason reps. I mean, Big Ben is one of the best throwers of the football that we have seen. Talking about consecutive seasons, quarterback averaging over 250 yards, one of the all-time greats. But what you need to be concerned about is, what about his first good hit in the regular season?
Yeah.
That next concussion. How long does that take him from being out? Because now the way they chart him, it's not the same as it used to be. Everyone knows about this. And soon as he get hit, soon as he's dazed and everything, Ben came into training camp in some of the best shape that we've seen him come in, and that's a good sign. I don't believe this absence will hurt him. Antonio missed some time last week. He's back. Ben will be back in a short period of time.
But it's the potential. Once you have, all concussions matter, obviously. All of them are scary. But repeated concussions in a short period of time, that's how you can get put on the shelf for quite some time. And so that also, you know what this reminded me of? I mean, this is what, when we were kind of poking fun at the Todd Haley-Greg Williams dispute, this is one of the things Todd Haley's talking about when he says good teams don't touch the quarterback. You got to be careful with your quarterback in training camp, man. Big Ben's now got his first concussion of the year, hopefully his only concussion of the year, but it's obviously something to monitor.
All right, after a brawl this past weekend, tempers flared again in Gents Washington joint practice. Safety DJ Swearinger faked a punch at his former teammate Terrell Pryor. Pryor, despite wearing a helmet, he flinched. Cece, what are your thoughts on flinching?
Terrell's from Ohio State, man. He knows he's a smart guy. You can get punched in the NFL in your face walking up on a guy. He's really, really smart. I don't know why people on the internet are going crazy. Oh, Terrell Pryor. Now, if he would have stood there, and what if DJ would have punched him? Because
but he's wearing a helmet. Does that matter? Can you still get hit through there?
You can get hit in the neck. You can get
okay.
I mean, here's my question, because DJ, I know DJ a little bit. DJ's a quality player, but he's a little crazy. I wouldn't have blamed Terrell Pryor if he sees him rear back. If he doesn't know DJ's not going to swing.
No, but he had the football in his hand. He's sitting there messing around. He shouldn't even have intersected with DJ. He should have kept walking straight, because in the league, man, you can get fired on. I've seen many guys get punched. Helmet on, helmet off, just like that with a left hand. So Terrell Pryor did the wrong thing by even going over there. And Bill Walsh's theory, there's 5 crazy guys on each roster. DJ Swearinger, holla, holla.
He's 1 through 5.
Yes.
All right, moving on. All eyes are on Aaron Rodgers' newest weapon at Packers training camp, tight end Jimmy Graham. Graham will have to carry a lot of the receiving load for Green Bay with Jordy Nelson no longer there. Rodgers said that the two are getting on the same page. Cece, how important is Jimmy Graham to the Packers' success on offense?
Yeah, I think we'll start to see the Jimmy Graham that we saw when he played with the New Orleans Saints, where they dominated. And he also played wide receiver. They split him out wide. I believe Aaron Rodgers, and his ability to call any play at any part in the field. If Aaron says they're on the same page, watch for big things from Jimmy Graham coming out of the pack this year.
And while I don't think Jimmy Graham's going to lead tight ends in receiving yards, he might be my bet to lead tight ends in receiving touchdowns, because the jump ball in the end zone, when you have a quarterback that can place the ball as well as Aaron Rodgers and an athlete as big and tall as Jimmy Graham, it's unguardable.
And a questionable running game.
Absolutely right. He will have a lot of impact, but once they get inside the 5-yard line, when's the last time Aaron Rodgers had a guy like Martellus Bennett? For a year?
Not the athlete.
A guy that he could just throw the ball up to that.
Jermichael Finley was pretty good.
Jermichael Finley for the neck injury. Yep.
All right, finally, in the least surprising news ever, Lane Johnson is chirping about the Patriots again. After calling New England a, quote, fear-based organization and talking about their, quote, arrogance this offseason, Lane Johnson is expecting a bit of backlash when the Patriots host the Eagles tomorrow night at Gillette.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. I hope they raise hell, they cuss me, and they can say whatever they want. At the end of the day, I'm not blocking them, I'm blocking the guys on the edge, so it really doesn't matter what they say. I know that I'm not going to be well-liked. I know this team ain't going to be well-liked going in there, so that's going to make us, I think, bring out our best.
What do you think, C?
Man, I'm inviting it. Listen, Lane Johnson's one of those 5 guys. Bill Walsh, okay? DJ Swearinger.
Yeah.
Okay, you can only do so much in a football game. All right, New England understands this. They got a lot of respect for Philadelphia. This is a football game. New England knows at this point in the season, they'll have certain goals, certain things. They'll be very, very vanilla as far as what they're going to present. So this is not a rematch. We have to see them during the regular season. But it will be not your regular exhibition game in the summer. The heat will be turned up a little bit, but I think the Patriots, they will take out their frustration on other players. I don't think it will be Lane.
Do you think is Lane a good enough? We know he's a good player. Is he a good enough player that he's not putting himself in a tougher position with? I love the talking.
Or his teammates.
But I want to talk about him specifically. Like, is he putting himself in a tougher position going into this year with all the chirping he's been doing?
No, he's a great player. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, what are you going to do? He can move you where he wants to move you. And they have skilled players. We talked about their roster, their depth. And he's got his boy back, Jason Peters, at the left tackle. They're the only team in football that has 2 left tackles. All right? That's how good Lane is. And when you are a good player, you know, it's not bragging if you can do it. And he's a guy who can back it all up.
But what about when I say other players, I meant, does that mean other players become targets for the Patriots to go after, maybe that are not in one stuck position, but could that possibly lead to escalating tension?
Well, this is if you decide to go after their front line, say it was possible. It's only a slim chance, but if it was possible, who do you go after? You go after the guy with the mummers parade, the guy that led with the outfit. You go after Jason Kelce. You go after one of the meanest dudes in the NFL, left tackle, Jason Peters, and then you go after his young understudy in Lane. They got a mean.
Brandon Brooks is a guard who's
I ain't even got to him yet. Like, those are not the guys you want to go after. They don't talk a lot. Lane does, but they could back it up.
And here's the other thing that I would say is, because even if you're talking about more the like the skill position guys, stuff like that, that's not who the Patriots are not a team that are, while their fans might want to do it themselves, the Patriots are not a team that going into a preseason game is going to cheap shot guys. Like, that is not what, there aren't many teams like that, if any, but certainly Bill Belichick is not going to allow this team to be like, hey, this is our chance to get the
it would be
back.
Totally against what the Patriots do.
I meant more so from a perspective of Lane Johnson is, you mentioned yesterday, we talked more about the Browns than any time in your memory of doing television. We talked more about this right tackle than any right tackle I ever remember. And some of that's just because he keeps talking. I love it. I feel like there is a spotlight on him, but he wants the spotlight on him. The first time we ever had him on the show, before he's a friend of the show, he's been on the show 3 or 4 times now, he came on wanting to say, I'm the best right tackle in the NFL. That was when the Eagles were like 5 games into the year. He was off a steroid suspension. Like, no, I'm the best right tackle in the NFL. So he's obviously not scared of it. It's just interesting to me, and to me at least, something to watch throughout the year.
All right, let's talk a little basketball. When you're an NBA team and you win just 35 games, expectations for the following season better be higher. Otherwise, you're not getting the concept of competition. They should especially be higher when you had the best player possibly of all time, and we're talking Lakers and we're talking LeBron, and yet many still don't have the Lakers as a top 3 team in the West. Kyle Kuzma disagrees. He said, we are both definitely excited about the roster and the pieces that we have, and we think that a lot of people are underestimating us. I don't know why people kind of just rule us out because we are young, we are hungry, we are competitive. Anybody that watched us play last year, we were in a lot of games. Having one of the greatest players of all time is going to raise what we do, raise our level of focus and the team to a higher level. Nick, I'll ask you, is Kyle Kuzma right that the Lakers are being underestimated here?
They're not being underestimated by the people that are saying the 3 or 4 seed in the West is about where you see them finishing. That's fair. They are certainly being underestimated by the growing media contingent. I did Chris Mannix's podcast a couple days ago. Chris Mannix, I love his NBA knowledge. People see him come on the show. We argue about the Celtics, but Mannix knows the NBA. He said he doesn't think the Lakers are going to make the playoffs. And he's not the only person saying that. I think they win 45 games, 10-win improvement, 45 games wouldn't get you in the playoffs last year in the West. Like, this is what I don't understand, right? If LeBron wasn't on the team, they went from 17 wins to 26 wins to 35 wins. Now, the more wins you have, the harder it is to get those next few. But if they hadn't added LeBron, don't you think most people would say that's about a 500 team? Lonzo a year older, Ingram a year older, 35 to 40. Okay. So is LeBron worth, if they were going to be a 40-win team without him, is LeBron worth 10 wins? How many wins was he worth last year? That team won,
all of them.
That team won 50. How many would they have won without him? 20? 25 max? Like,
I mean, they won 50 games, but it was like 70 because they went through so many different trades.
Right.
Like, I mean, you can't look at it and say, well, Cleveland in 2017-18, they won 50 games. No, that don't tell the story. Right. Kyrie Irving demanded a trade. You get IT, he's hurt. Like, you even have to get some draft pick back compensation because of his injury. Like, so that doesn't really tell how many games they actually won. LeBron James is the best player in the world. And as I said last year, he went to the NBA Finals with 4 pieces of paper. And I got a lot of respect for Kevin Love and what he's accomplished in the league. But there is no one on Cleveland's roster that I want over who the Lakers have and the young players. And if LeBron played a different style, if LeBron was Kevin Durant, I would be like, I don't know if they can get to potentially 50 wins.
What type of style do you mean?
Yeah, if he was Steph Curry, I would say, because they do make players better, but no one makes players better than LeBron. Because LeBron's going to get you 28 with the Lakers, 28, 9, and 8. That's what he's going to get. But his ability to make other players better, especially on the offensive end, I think that's what makes him the best player in the world. No disrespect to Steph, no disrespect to KD, but that is the pool that LeBron, and let's not forget the team that he joined in Cleveland. Oh, man, that team was awful.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really bad team. So I think as Kuz said, I think that people are underestimating what LeBron can do with this roster.
But also don't underestimate something you brought up, which is the fact that these Kuzma and Ingram and Ball, they're going to be a year older. They're going to get better.
And
he's the most dynamic playmaker, and he's going to help showcase what they can do.
Right, like those guys we would all expect improvement from. Like just like how with the Rockets, I said before the moment the season ended, they got a little bit worse because Chris Paul got a year older. Well, for the Sixers with all their young players, for the Celtics, by the way, with Tatum and Brown, for the Lakers, the moment the season ended, they got better because those players will improve. But there's it's a weird mental gymnastics people are doing because at the same time I hear people saying, don't know how good the Lakers are going to be. I hear people saying, watch out for the Pelicans. Why? Well, they got Anthony Davis could be league MVP. Okay, great. So could he. And you look at the roster. So the Pelicans lost Rondo. The Pelicans didn't bring back Cousins. It's so like Mirotic versus Ingram. Like Drew Holiday's a really good player, but like so I just don't. I feel like you've got to really try to trick yourself to convince yourself. The Lakers aren't necessarily going to be the 3 seed, but the idea that they're going to be the 9th or the 10th seed, I don't see how that could happen.
I just like to take a look at the Lakers where they were last year, Nick, before we moved from L.A. here, where they were. They were finishing the Summer League. They were excited about Ball. You know, he looked good in the Summer League, was MVP of the Summer League. Ingram played in the Summer League at the beginning, right? Looked impressive. They held him out of the end of the Summer League. Kuzma, man, wasn't even expecting him to do nothing.
No.
Now, look at where they are. Ball's like, man, I got 50 games under my belt. We know he needs to improve his jump shot, but also he realized he needed to get into the weight room. Ingram realized he could be a star. He's so happy he's with the Lakers. He thought that he was definitely going to get traded. Kuzma, the most underrated of the bunch, is really developing and can be a great role player for the Los Angeles Lakers. So, and then you add LeBron to that. So the natural progression, we forgot where they were last year. These young players, none of those players is in that same position. You add LeBron to it. I believe it's going to be exciting basketball.
And I understand people are going to say, but it was the East and this is the West. We do have to be honest about where we are with the 2 conferences right now. At the bottom, right? Last year there were 8 teams that were awful, that won 28 games or fewer. 4 in the West, 4 in the East. Last year there were 6 teams that were really good, that won 50 games or more. 2 in the West, 4 in the East. Now, where the West is clearly better is like that middle half.
Yeah.
The 9 seed in the West was...
And it's hard to be fair when you see the top tilted like that.
So like the 2 best teams were in the West, Golden State and Houston. I would argue the next 4 best teams were out East, Toronto, Boston, Philly, and Cleveland. And then it gets to, after that, that's where the West has the advantage, right? Because like the 9 seed in the West was the Nuggets, who won 46 games. The 9 seed in the East were the Pistons, who were terrible. But when you're competing for a playoff spot, guess what? You're competing with teams in the West. They have the same Western Conference schedule as you. So however much harder it is, that evens itself out as far as competing for the playoffs. I don't see. Wake me when a LeBron James team doesn't win 50 games. Like, let me know when that happens. Last year was the worst team he could have possibly been on, and they found a way to win 50 games. Like, I don't see that being a concern this year for the Lakers.
You know that Nick has an NBA countdown to the regular season clock?
63 days.
In his bedroom?
We were at the midway point of the offseason 2 days ago, 65 from, 65 till we're at 63.
That he carries around with him wherever he goes, and it's under the table. Hey, we're going to take a break. We haven't talked about the Browns in a hot minute. Are the Cleveland Browns making a big mistake with Baker Mayfield? That's next. This is First Things First. Here on First Things First, we're now joined by Super Bowl champ Chris Canty. I just gave him an air 5 because I'm sitting a person away from him, because that's the cool thing to do when you're not right next to someone.
That is the cool thing to do. So
few things cooler in life than the air 5.
Only heard it from Jenna, but that's
born?
what I heard. 82.
That's when it was cool.
That's when it was cool back then.
Okay.
I do air 5s
need to
with
leave
my
that
little
back
one
then.
all the time.
We tried.
We need to leave that
Anything
back
that
then.
Jenna, the
works
coolest
for
one
your-
she ever hung out with, though.
Oh, okay. So that's
I got you, Jenna. There
So
you
she's
go.
excited. I get it.
Absolutely.
She's
Excited to see
He
you.
thinks I'm the coolest one of all my friends. Which
It's true, which
sad and
is,
pathetic.
man, that's reality TV, boys and girls.
Chris Canty, it has been quite a preseason for the Cleveland Browns. They're no longer the butt of all the jokes. They are clearly the stars of HBO's Hard Knocks. And they got a solid first start out of their #1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield. Despite all of that goodness, though, Browns head coach Hugh Jackson says Baker will not unseat Tyrod Taylor as the starter, nor get any first-team reps this preseason. Chris Canty, is there anything you think Baker Mayfield can do to convince Hugh Jackson that he should be the quarterback for the Browns?
I don't think there's anything that Baker can do this preseason to convince Hugh, because when Hugh Jackson is looking at his football team, he's saying we're trying to change the culture more so than anything with the Cleveland Browns, and you need a quarterback that's going to be able to allow you to have some success, especially early on, right? They won in 31 in the last 2 years. So all the slogans, all the mantras throughout the offseason and in the training camp, they all ring hollow if you don't have winning to back some of that up. And I think Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback that gives them the best chance to win right now. Tyrod Taylor just has more answers for the looks that he's going to face from opposing defenses than Baker Mayfield, because he's seen more football. If you look at the first preseason game, Tyrod Taylor in those first 2 drives, he hit big plays on safety blitzes by Landon Collins of the New York Giants. He recognizes one-on-one coverage on the outside to Jarvis Landry on the first drive, hits him for a 30-yard gain. The second drive, he recognized another safety blitz. Landon Collins is coming down. David Njoku one-on-one against Alec Ogletree. You got a touchdown. Tyrod was 5 for 5, 99 yards and a touchdown. That's the biggest thing. When you look at that versus what Baker did. Now, Baker was impressive. He was good in situational football, third down, red zone.
But the guy threw 5 passes and they got 100 yards out of it. That's your point, right?
That's my point.
That's the point, is it was just big play after big play.
But not only that, but looking at the coverages that Tyrod was facing versus what Baker was facing. Baker was looking at a lot of fundamental, basic front coverage defenses, because you got the second and the third deep out there versus the first team. And so when you're seeing those vanilla looks, you're probably going to have a little more success as a quarterback. When you get to regular season football, there are more moving parts because there are different schemes. And that's why I think Tyrod is better equipped right now than Baker to handle that.
And as far as can Baker convince them, certainly not if he's getting 0 first-team reps in training camp. That would also mean he's not going to start any preseason games. And then John Dorsey, he was asked, will Baker start this year? And he said, nope, not week 1, not week 9, not at all. Now, that could change. But if you are trying to close the door on him starting at all this season, then we can close the door on him starting in September. We might be able to close the door on him starting in October. And John Dorsey matters here. Typically, the GM, who is the guy who's picking the players, can put his finger on the scale in favor of his first-round quarterback. John Dorsey's history says, I will put my finger on the scale in favor of the other quarterback. He didn't let Aaron Rodgers start his first year, didn't let Pat Mahomes start until the final game of the season, a meaningless Week 17 game. Those are the last 2 teams John Dorsey has run, the last 2 first-round quarterbacks John Dorsey has taken.
But CC, it's not like this team is projected to go to the playoffs. So if you have a team that's starting from 1 win in 2 seasons, wouldn't you want to put him out there and say, well, experience is going to teach you more than watching film and tape? This is where you're going to learn.
Well, every scenario is not the same. Yesterday we talked about Sam Darnold, and that was the storyline that we painted. But every quarterback is not in the same situation. Actually, what John Dorsey's doing, what the head coach is doing, is they're trying to save Baker Mayfield's career, all right? That's the reason why they traded for a quarterback. They thought they were going to be in the business for a quarterback. But they said, man, let's get one of these kids. Let's sit him behind a legitimate NFL starter, one of the rare quarterbacks. 12 quarterbacks last year led their teams to the playoff. Tyrod was one of those. No, there's nothing Baker's going to be able to do in training camp to be able to unseat Tyrod. They are helping Baker Mayfield. And as you mentioned, and you pointed out, you're the only person I heard to point out as far as what Dorsey's history is. That is what they're going to do. He's been successful at doing that. And last year, the reason why Mahomes played was because that was the first week that the Chiefs were out of the playoffs.
No, they had clinched the playoffs.
And they gave him that extra one.
It was the first week that didn't matter. It didn't matter.
So with his ability to be able to get him in there, to get him some reps, that's the only way that he played last year. I believe this is the right plan for Baker Mayfield. I believe at probably the 6-game, 8-game mark, we're going to have to reevaluate this. But I like what they're doing.
Yeah, I like what the Cleveland Browns are doing. It feels like they're on their way. And listening and watching Hard Knocks last night, you heard Hugh Jackson talk to Baker Mayfield about learning the process. They were referring to Tyrod Taylor getting into the building early, getting that workout in before everybody else gets there. And
he told him he didn't have a regimen.
Exactly. Hugh Jackson asked him, well, why aren't you here early? Where's your early morning workout? Why aren't you studying tape early like Tyrod? That's the thing that Baker Mayfield has to figure out. And he's got a pros pro in Tyrod Taylor that can show him the way. Now, in terms of a talent and being able to have those intangibles, you're hoping that Baker Mayfield has more of that than Tyrod Taylor. That's why they made him the #1 overall pick. But it's not for Baker Mayfield to step in right now and be their starting quarterback.
And by the way, real quick, he just laughed that off, by the way. He almost didn't take Hugh Jackson seriously when he said, he's like, yeah.
At first, and then he, absolutely realized, no.
Right, but at first,
you're totally right that he at first, I think he thought Hugh was just poking at him. And he realized, oh no, he expects me to be here whenever the earliest guy is here. I need to be there then or before. But you mentioned one of 12 quarterbacks to lead their team to the playoffs. That is something about Tyrod. That is something we've heard the Browns say repeatedly.
Yes.
We have sat here and said 5 or 6 wins be a great year for the Browns. It'd be a 5-win improvement or a 6-win improvement. I guarantee there are people in the Browns right now that think, man, our roster's as good as Buffalo's was last year. Like, it's happened. I think it was the Miami Dolphins go from 1-15 to 11-5. Oh, like we have seen that type of. We saw Jacksonville go from 3-13 to 10-6. They are in Cleveland. They're saying, how did the Browns get there? They had a good tight end, Charles Clay. We like Njoku more. Who is the Browns' #1 receiver? We like Jarvis Landry more.
Yes.
Who is the Browns' #1 pass rusher? We like Myles Garrett more. Like, let's see how good we can be. As odd as it sounds for us to be saying it, in that building, I'm sure they're saying, Baker's our future. Let's see if we can get to 8 wins with Tyrod Taylor. Let's see what it would take to be in the playoff hunt in November, which we haven't been in Cleveland in a decade. Like, that's where their head's at.
And how much of this do you think is just reaction to years past, of making mistakes, of throwing maybe Manziel out there too early, of taking all their shiny new toys and just throwing them out there in front and saying, you know what, we're going to do this right this time. Yeah. Let's sit the guy, let's wait, let's do this the right way.
It would be easy to say that, but you can't draw that conclusion because no one is there in the building. If you had the same people, then you'd be like, you know something, I'm not going to. Dorsey, this is what Dorsey has done. Now, and I believe also in conjunction with Hugh, Hugh's trying to buy himself another year. So it's Dorsey's plan. Hugh's trying to execute. It's not Hugh's plan. All right? Dorsey is running the personnel for the Cleveland Browns, and he has decided that Baker's going to stay. And Hugh is just endorsing that by every day reinforcing what the general manager's plan is going to be.
And it helps to put a button on it that Tyrod is doing everything. Tyrod's giving them no exit plan. He is the first one in the building. He did go 5 for 5. He is being a leader on and off the field. It's not like, but Tyrod was awful in that first preseason game. Like, Tyrod's done everything they would ask him to do, everything they expected him to do.
I have never been at a job that it was easy to get rid of the first person there every day. Everywhere I have been.
Never seen it.
That first person, they're going to have a job.
Yeah. Shout out, Pepper.
What?
I mean, dumb people just don't show up early.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, they show up like Nick.
Wow.
Oh, the three of us? Hey, Chris, stick around. Do us a favor. Coming up, are the Philadelphia Eagles turning into a dynasty? That's next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with Chris Canty. It's all coming up and going down in Philly, Canty. While all eyes are on the quarterback position.
It's going down. It don't have to come up to go down. It's going down in Philly.
Jenna, you just got to take the L on this phrase and never speak it again.
What is the Mendoza line in batting? What is it?
200.
Oh, Jenna.
Jenna on the... It's
150.
Wow. We want to know, let me start over. Wow. All eyes are on the quarterback position and whether Carson Wentz will be ready for week 1. Head coach Doug Peterson thinks that his Super Bowl winning team, the one many believe to be one of the best and deepest all-around teams, actually got better this offseason. Here's Coach Doug Peterson.
Well, I think on paper, you look at the depth of where you know, at each position, the depth that we have. It's definitely the deepest roster in my 3 years here. It's really exciting because, you know, the hardest thing is you're going to have to cut good players, and you're going to have to cut players that are probably going to end up on rosters somewhere else.
Chris, is it possible that the Eagles are actually better this season than that stacked team they had, that deep team at almost every position they had last year?
Yeah, it's possible, and I think they actually are better. I don't think Doug Peterson is blowing smoke. This isn't coach speak. They are a better football team, personnel-wise, than the team that won the Super Bowl a year ago. When you look at the two deep, especially on the offensive and defensive lines, I think that's where the strength of this football team is. CC, you always talk about different teams matching up versus other personnel rosters.
Yes.
But you say the Eagles match up well against anybody because they have solid play on the offensive and defensive line. I was looking at the two deep on the offensive line. Those guys have 74 starts between them. Right. That's the two deep on the offensive line.
Right.
So you can survive. You survived Jason
Vitae.
You survived Jason Peters' injury last year because you had Vitae being able to step in. He's got experience now. But guess what? Jason Peters is an upgrade from the left tackle that they had in the Super Bowl. Michael Bennett is an upgrade from Vinny Curry. Haloti Ngata came over this offseason in free agency. You look at the secondary. They've got a lot of experienced guys back there. So I feel really good about this Eagles team, and their depth is what's going to allow them to sustain the success throughout this regular season.
So here's the thing. I think they are better. But as you guys all know, in the NFL, because the sample size is just 16 games, you can be better and have the record be worse. Like, the Eagles being better does not necessarily... You win the Super Bowl, you get better, well, then I guess they're winning the next Super Bowl. That's not how this league works. Like, does anyone at this table think they win the Super Bowl last year without home field advantage?
No.
No. So how about this, Canny? Do they get home field advantage if in, week 3? How'd they beat the Giants? The woeful Giants.
A long field goal.
61-yard field goal at the gun. We then saw them a couple weeks, or 1 week later, I think, squeeze out a win against the Chargers. Like, they're close games last year. We saw them against Carolina. Cam had it down 5 at midfield with 2 minutes left, and they get a stop. Now, they get credit for all of those wins. But the point that I'm making is that you can be better, and if 13-3 due to a couple bad bounces, a 61-yard field goal not going in, turns into 12-4 or 11-5, then it's a totally different situation. They were amazing. They lost their MVP quarterback, and they won the damn Super Bowl, and we think they're better, but it's not the Warriors. Man, they won the championship. They got better. Give them the championship again. Football, because the sample sizes are so small and injuries play such a big part, you can't quite do that same math. But I agree, they're a deeper team, and they were the deepest team in football last year.
Is there something to a Super Bowl hangover, Chris? Is there something to, hey, we were chasing. Oh, now we're the ones that are being chased? Does the mindset affect play at all?
I think it's worth conversating about. I think different organizations, depending on what was their pursuit of the Super Bowl, and I believe in doing that, you can have, because they put everything into the Eagles. They didn't put everything into last year's Super Bowl. You know what they did? They put everything into building this roster. They put everything into supporting the head coach, all right? They support the quarterback. That's why they had a good backup. Now, once they got into the chase, then it was like, hey, man, we're here. Let's go ahead and win this.
Let's get Jay.
And then now once they saw that they won it and realized how many key players they could retain because of where they were with the salary cap and because their quarterback was on his first contract, now it's like, we can win a few of these. We looked at the beast, faced it, knocked it down in New England. So why wouldn't their goal be to win multiple Super Bowls? When you got players coming back in Jordan Hicks, their middle linebacker. You talk about those games that, but they didn't have these players. What about Darren Sproles? You add him.
He's gone for the whole year.
Okay, now he's going to be coming back. So I know this roster is better. I don't think they're going to suffer a Super Bowl hangover. Now they had some hangovers because they did some partying. but I believe that the ownership, it took them so long to get there. I believe that the head coach, he just getting his first taste. The quarterback, he ain't got no hangover because he didn't even get – he was at the party, but he was in the back trying to dance. So
he was the designated driver.
So I just believe that all those things lead to the Philadelphia Eagles being as hungry as any team that we've seen in pursuit of their second Super Bowl.
And see, that's the difference to me with this Philadelphia Eagles team. I think that you have so many individuals that are part of this organization that are hungry. Don't forget about Howie Roseman. Remember when they brought in Chip Kelly, he was demoted. He wasn't in charge of personnel anymore. So he's now validated
he can't
as a decision maker. He wants to continue to win championships. Jason Peters, he didn't win a championship last year. He wasn't on the field for the Super Bowl.
Dogs.
Michael Bennett coming over from the Seattle Seahawks. He wants to win again. Like he's a champion.
That's a good point.
Yeah, Haloti Ngata. He wants to win again. He's a champion.
Yeah.
So all of these guys want to have success at the highest level, and they know it's possible because a GM put together a really good team, and a head coach has a model, a formula for how this team is going to win games on the field.
Well, and the hangover, we see it in sports. Like championship hangovers are real. Pat Riley would call it the disease of war.
It happened to us. It happened to the New York Giants in 2012. But the difference between us and the Philadelphia Eagles, they have a lot more depth than the Giants had.
And the difference is, going into last year, who was the most popular player on the Eagles from a leadership reputation standpoint? Jason Peters. You saw it when he got injured. The entire team, they treated his injury the way you treat guys that suffer spinal cord injuries, where like the whole team comes over with support. It was a bad injury, it's a knee injury, but they weren't worried about his life. But it was because of who it was. He has a ring, but as you mentioned, he doesn't have he's a champion in more in name than in actuality. And their quarterback, the best player on their team, he has the opposite of a hangover. He's got a chip on his shoulder because they're so deep. And what Nick Foles did, things can turn quick in sports. And I know C's saying he's a stud, and I agree with him. But all of a sudden, if they don't, Carson Wentz is going to convince himself this year, if we don't win the Super Bowl, they're going to blame me. They did it with Nick Foles. We got everybody back. And so this is one team that is almost immune to the hangover because they did something we never see in sports. They won a title with their backup quarterback, with their backup left tackle. You mentioned their backup middle linebacker.
So just from the folks that I've spoken to in Philadelphia right now, the thinking is this team is going to go as Carson Wentz comes back and goes. But what do you think is going to be the biggest factor to get this Eagles team back to the Super Bowl?
Man, I believe their defense can be dominant. I'm concerned about their secondary. All right, I'm concerned about their offensive coordinator and Mike Groh taking over. It's a big opportunity for him. It's a lot to man when you have a quarterback and the type of personnel. So those are the things that are question mark. Their secondary, how good will they be? I know the linebackers are good. Their front line is one of the best in football. Mike Groh, I believe him to be a competent coordinator. How does he handle the bright lights of being the coordinator there? So those are the things that, if going into the season, that we have to look for as far as if there's a weak spot, if there's a chance to potentially fall back, how does he handle that new responsibility and that defensive secondary? Are they going to be as good as they were last year? In big spots, they're not a great secondary. They don't have great talent, but they played well together.
You agree?
I agree with it. The secondary is going to be a product of how much pressure they can generate up front. But the fact that they have a 7 or 8 man rotation gives me confidence that that's going to be an opportunistic group, because those guys hunting the opposing quarterbacks, that's going to create opportunities for turnovers on the back end.
If we're nitpicking as well, I'd monitor the injury to Alshon Jeffrey. Yeah, obviously they added Mike Wallace. We think he's an upgrade over Torrey Smith, but he's an older player. They lost the backup tight end, Trey Burton.
Brent Selleck is gone now, but they got Dallas Goedert.
Absolutely. So, like, if we're nitpicking, but that is how many teams we talk about across the league that would give their left arms for the Eagles wide receiving core? And I'm saying that's something to watch for. So that's a small one to just keep an eye on.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.